Earnestly podcast coming to you on January 25th, 2021, or 22 rather. I keep doing this every time. I intro the show. I keep getting the wrong year every single freaking time. I don't get it. Anyway, Earnestly podcast on part of the Earnestly Speaking Podcast Network. Yes. Busy day of podcasts today for me. I've been recording all day. I just wrapped up the last segment of the Football's Awesome podcast, which will be dropping later on today or tomorrow, depending on what time I get finished. I'm also planning on recording an In the Paint podcast with Zach the Degenerate and Chris Charismatic later on tonight as well too. And then I'm doing my usual Tuesday guest spot on the Huddle Up podcast this week. I think it's my second to last one of the year because there's no show next week, but there'll be one Super Bowl week as well. But like I said, this podcast network, of course, subscribe to this podcast, Earnestly Podcast Network on any podcast catcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple, Stitcher, you name it. There's a lot to talk about today. And like I said, I want to just dive into some of these topics here and there. I want to dive into these topics and just kind of run with this. There's a lot of things to talk about in sports, a lot of things to talk about in pro wrestling, a lot of things to talk about in life. And let me start here first. Life. Last night, my family, my wife and I, and our two kids, as well as a couple friends of ours, and their families, we all went to the fair, South Florida Fair. This was the first time for me in 15 years that I've gone to the fair. And I was reminded why I waited 15 years to go to the fair. It is I complain about Disney being a money pit, and Target being a money pit, and Universal being a money pit. Man, the fair is the same thing. But I will say, at least the food's good. When I was younger, I went to the fair a lot. I used to go for the rides and all that, and obviously that was you do that, you go for the rides. But as I got older, I don't necessarily love going on rides the same way I used to. I mean, I'll do a couple of rides at Disney here and there, but I'm for the most part am someone who prefers to just relax and just kind of be in the background and all that, and it is what it is. And to me, and I forgot that there's a lot of things for kids to do under 10 years old, especially. So my 8-year-old, my 4-year-old, we ended up getting them unrestricted bands for the night, $26 a person, which is really worth it. And they pretty much did almost every kids ride there imaginable to do, and they did that, and I had a good time. But yeah, I had a good time. I ate to my heart's content. I even stayed within the budget. I think my wife and I discussed the fact that we're going to eat. We're going to probably get some stuff for the kids, probably maybe a couple, gifts or whatever. So we wanted to stay within a certain budget. I think we stayed within the budget, barely. But I was reminded why I don't go every year. Every year, I mean, like I said, I let's say I wouldn't go, but I had a good time, and I think I'll probably go again next year. But I go for the food, man. To me, it's for the food. It's food or bust, But aside from that, I had a great time. And we'll see what happens next year. Will I do 2 years in a row? We shall see. But first time at the fair since 2007. I was 20. I wasn't even 27 yet. My wife and I just started dating maybe 6 months before that, and we were still fresh. And now since going to the fair, we've had 2 kids. We're married, and we was almost 16 years into the relationship. It's crazy. It really is. But I had a great time. It was fun. And I had a blast. And like I said, I tend to be very conservative because of money, but I'm trying to become more. What's the word? Like, look, when you die, money doesn't come with you. So you have to be. I'm trying to be a little more balanced when it comes to this kind of stuff. I don't want to be the guy, the man who sits there and just, we gotta save money. No, we gotta save money, of course, but we have to also enjoy the fruits of your labor. I work, my wife works, we have a good time. If anything, I always told her I'd rather put my money into like experiences. So something like this, for example, is experience, traveling. Whether it's to Disney or to other states and other places. Those are things I remember when I'm older. Like, I remember that time I went to this place, or that time I went to this event and concerts. Another thing too. I'm actually going to the Tool concert. They're coming to town in a few weeks, and I was kind of nudged into going by my wife because she said, "Look, you need a guys' night. Go out with your friends in a Tool concert." So I'm doing that as well. So like, I'm trying to be more balanced when it comes to these things, because I know it's hard for me to get out my own way and whatnot. But yeah, the fair was fun last night. I had a good time. So we had breaking news about half an hour ago. I actually broke the news on the Football Salsa podcast while I was doing my Stone Game report with Kyle Nash. Sean Payton is leaving the New Orleans Saints after 16 years. There been some speculation the last couple of days about his future. And I will say, I'm not terribly shocked by this, because you look at first of all, the salary cap situation is awful. They lost Drew Brees last year to retirement. Sean Payton now is leaving the team. Right now, before they start making modifications on the roster, they are right now over $74 million over the cap. They're in cap hell. And we don't know who is their quarterback. Like, James Winston was, he wasn't particularly impressive throughout the entire before he got hurt. He was okay. Taysom Hill, not the answer. Ian Book, not the answer. I wonder if, two things here. Is it because the Saints are... Well, first off, the Saints, the fact they were 9-8 in the year this season and had a chance to make the playoffs, given the situation, is a credit to how good Sean Payton, a great coach he is. He's a fantastic coach. Top 5 in the league right now. One of the best offensive minds in the last quarter century. I mean, you see the work he did with the Giants back when he was at the OC. And I'm not knocking Drew Brees here, but Sean Payton should get some more credit, a lot of credit for putting Drew Brees in a position to be who he became, a Hall of Fame quarterback. So on one hand, you have the situation, well, the Saints are deteriorating. Maybe it's time for Sean Payton to maybe, exit stage right, and I can see that. On the other hand, here's the bigger possibility in my mind, and the first thing that crossed my mind when I saw the news on Sean Payton leaving was Dallas Cowboys. And I say that because I said last week after the Cowboys lost to the Niners in the playoffs, the wildcard game, that I am not advocating for Mike McCarthy's dismissal in Dallas, but it would not shock me if Jerry Jones and the Cowboys decided to part ways with Mike McCarthy. And it would probably take some major, situation or availability of a coach or something of that nature to probably trigger Jerry Jones into making a move like that. Sean Payton, for the last, God knows, maybe last decade, but certainly last 5 years, has been linked to that Cowboys job for a long time. When Jason Garrett was under a hot seat every so often, just every year, every couple weeks, Sean Payton's name always came up. Before Sean Payton signed an extension, we speculated for years, will Sean Payton be the next guy in tow? He has history in Dallas. Jerry Jones loves him. I think Jerry Jones actually wants him. And you given the fact the way Dallas lost last week, they look a week later, he decides to leave this team. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but the speculation is warranted. And if I'm the Cowboys and Sean Payton, it would not shock me. First off, let's just start here. It will not shock me if Sean Payton decides to go to Dallas. And it will shock me if Dallas fires McCarthy and hires Sean Payton. Look, I know, Mike McCarthy has 4 years, 3 years left on his deal. He's Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is a billionaire. He owns arguably the biggest sports franchise in this country. It's chump change to get rid of Mike McCarthy. He'll get paid all his money. Trust me on that. For Sean Payton, and Sean Payton, you give him, put him in Dak Prescott's hands, especially, that can work wonders. It would not shock me if Sean Payton and Dallas are a thing as soon as the next month. Would not shock me. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that's the first thing that crossed my mind, given the history and some of the rumors and innuendos of what we've heard about both Sean Payton and the Dallas Cowboys. So, we'll see how this goes. Is this going to be we're not quite there yet because we still have Championship Weekend coming up. We still have, obviously, the Super Bowl coming up as well too. But this is already going to be a very intriguing weekend. Which we'll get to about Aaron Rodgers in a second. Second Divisional Weekend. A lot of people believe that this is the hyperbole. Was this the best or the greatest weekend in NFL history, playoff history? I honestly have a hard time finding a week that I've enjoyed more than this weekend, given the games that played out and given the way the games played out. I have a hard time saying no, honestly. And I've thought about this now for about 2 days, and I watched football for 32 years, and I don't remember a weekend where we have so many significant things happen, and the game was the way they ended and whatnot. It's really, I have a hard time seeing that. You may get a game or two here and there in the same weekend happen, but 4 games where it was impacted so much, and the way they ended and whatnot, capped up by the Chiefs and Bills game, the way that ended, I have a hard time really finding a weekend better than this one, honestly. So I'm going to say yes. I'm not even leaning on hyperbole or prisoner of the moment, if you will. I'm just being honest and to a fault. So I'm going to say yes on that one. And we're discussing the weekend, and of course one of the big takeaways of the weekend is Aaron Rodgers and what's his future. Obviously he can. We remember coming to the year, he shortened his deal with the Packers, so it gave him room to play one more year, and he can leave after this year, provided that he decides to leave. Now, obviously, I think we all assume that all hinge on how well the season went for Rodgers. Obviously, the Packers were number 1 seed this year, and many believe were the favorites to win the NFC and probably even the Super Bowl this year, and then they lose one and done to the Niners this weekend. It wasn't the fact that you lost to the Niners, because I said on the podcast the last couple of weeks that the Niners is a bad matchup for the Packers. But the Packers should have won that game anyway, especially the way the game played out. It's not the Niners played a great game on both sides of the ball. The offense was absolute crap the entire night, until the last drive of the game, of course. But Aaron Rodgers, not saying he lost the game, but he sure something to win it from, and you get even one more touchdown, they win that game. And yet, Rodgers couldn't do it. And again, it's now brought up the conversation about where he ranks in the legacy of Aaron Rodgers and all that. Is he still a all-time great? Yes, he's all-time great. I tweeted this on Sunday. We need to get out of the prisoner moment thing and calm down and bring perspective. This is where I stand Aaron Rodgers' legacy. Is he a top 5 quarterback? Probably. But the way to rank these things is in tiers. Forget doing it in terms of ranking him, top 3, 4, 5. I would probably still put him in top 5 or 6 quarterbacks all the time, just based on his talent alone. Certainly, it is very disappointing how he's failed in the playoffs, especially in the last 10 years. Like, it's actually forgotten he's won a Super Bowl, actually. Yes, Aaron Rodgers has won a Super Bowl before. I don't know if you guys remember this, but he has won a Super Bowl before. But it feels like that because it's been so long that we forget that fact. But let's go here. Tier 1 is really resident too. Like, I know we've had arguments about maybe Tom Brady being by himself, Tier 1 by himself. I'm going to still put Joe Montana on Tier 1 as well too, because I think if Joe Montana had a chance to play longer with the injuries, he might have gotten a couple more rings as well. But he also won 4-0 in Super Bowls too, and that has to count for something to some degree. So Tier 1 is Montana and Brady. Tier 2, I put Peyton Manning. I throw in John Elway. I'll throw in Aaron Rodgers in there. Because essentially, Aaron Rodgers is pretty much Peyton Manning. He starts with Peyton Manning pre-Broncos. And let's be real, Peyton Manning had to be carried on his last Super Bowl team before he retired. That was a defense, and that was, a sizably great roster. And Peyton Manning was throwing ducks that year. Peyton Manning was terrible last year before retirement. He had to be carried. And not to say he didn't make big plays when he needed to, but he certainly wasn't the Peyton Manning. So if you exclude that Super Bowl from Peyton Manning's legacy, he's basically the same as Aaron Rodgers, winning one Super Bowl. So, but we also rank Peyton Manning hire because we like the guy. He's a great guy. He's a good dude. People don't like Aaron Rodgers for whatever reason. He's a diva, the COVID stuff. But this is the problem. We can't be ranking and rating quarterbacks based on our feelings. And this is the problem I've had with people all the time. You need to separate logic and and your feelings for whatever it be. Aaron Rodgers is an all-time great. I have no problem putting Aaron Rodgers in my top 5 of all time. No problem with that whatsoever. So I'll do it. So I mean, but what does he do? Does he stay? Does he go? That's the big mystery. That's a major mystery right now. Is Aaron Rodgers' future in Green Bay? Honestly, I don't know. I don't know what he does. I think it's all in play. I think all of it's all in play. So, and the same thing with Tom Brady. Tom Brady now, there's been some, speculation about Tom Brady's future. On his podcast, he had some words, talking about his future and having to worry about family and being able to, the importance of relationships. Here's a quote here to what he says here. I mean, it's pretty direct. He said, quote, "I said this a few years ago. It's what relationships are all about. It's not always what I want. It's what we want as a family, and I'm going to spend a lot of time with them and figure out in the future what's next. It pains her," this is Giselle, his wife, "to see me get hit out there. And she deserves what she needs from me as a husband, and my kids deserve what they need from me as a father, as a dad." That's from Tom Brady on his podcast. What the name of his podcast is? Was it Let's Go? Yeah. This is my opinion on Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady will play one more year at least. And then maybe hang it up after next year. I believe what he says is true. I've always said this with Tom Brady, that if the decision was solely about him, there's no question he's back next year, without question. But because he has to consider other elements that connect him, his wife, his kids. He doesn't need the money. He's rich as hell. He's not even the biggest money maker in his house right now. His wife is. That doesn't really matter. But those are things that have to be considered. So my opinion is I think Brady comes back. I think Brady does come back. But I do think under consideration, this is the first time I think really that he's really seriously considering retirement. I think maybe it's crossed his mind in the past, with the way things ended in New England and when he was a free agent. I'm sure it crossed his mind, but I think he had in his mind that I'm playing football. This is the first time I really believe Tom Brady is really sitting down and assessing the entire field, and not just on the field, but off the field. So, hopefully, I hope he comes back. Tom Brady has been fantastic. He is great to. He's been great for the league. People may not like the guy, but he's been fantastic for the league. So we'll see what happens there with Brady and his future. I think that's going to be something to look at, obviously. And we may get an answer on that one probably sooner than we realize. All right, coaching updates real quick. Dan Quinn is a finalist for multiple jobs right now. The job in Denver, the job in Chicago is a finalist. All the hearing reports that Jim Caldwell is now leaped as a favorite to get the Bears job. It did trigger a conversation a couple days yesterday on social media about Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn got fired at Atlanta as head coach, I think 2 years ago. He was a DC for the Dallas Cowboys this year. He did a really good job with that Cowboys team. But people are questioning whether it deserves to get hired by the Falcons, given the way they ended everything. And also the fact that people actually credit Kyle Shanahan for the year they went to the Super Bowl, for the Falcons turning things around to go to the Super Bowl. And then once Shanahan got the San Francisco job, things has slowly diminished from there. The thing is, those things could be true, and probably are true. But at the same time, because was a head coach that went to a Super Bowl and had some success in Atlanta, he's going to, by default, and should, by default, deserves a second chance. And I think he will get a job. I think, I've been saying this in the last week, I think Denver is the perfect spot for him. Sorry, water. I think he's going to Denver. That's where I think he's going to go. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, Chicago's in play. A couple other jobs are in play. And now with the New Orleans Saints and Sean Payton now being, eliminated from, not deciding to leave, step away, the Saints job is going to be up for grabs now. So we'll see how that plays out. I also got into the discussion on social media yesterday about Eric Bienemy, and he's the offensive coordinator of the Chiefs, of course, and he's been one of the hottest commodities the last couple of years. Being the guy, one of the guys that's triggered the amazing Kansas City Chiefs offense and Patrick Mahomes and whatnot. And he's had some interviews in recent years. To my knowledge, he has not taken any interviews this year. I don't know if he's available or maybe not available, whatever. But it did warrant discussions yesterday on social media from certain followers of mine about whether or not if he's done getting interviews because he's black. And I think that's just, to me personally, I understand the the nature of people and minorities in coaching gigs right now. Right now, we only have one current black head coach, is Mike Tomlin. Now, granted, he's also one of the most tenured coaches in the league in general. We've had a lot of black coaches get fired this year, the last couple of years in general. But I do think that's too easy to just say that in the case of Eric Bienemy, especially too, because I still think, actually, to be honest, I'm not saying this is true or not. I'm just saying this is my opinion, that Eric Bienemy is going to be the guy in waiting once Andy Reid retires. I think we're closer to Andy Reid retiring than people realize. And why would Eric Bienemy leave that post, especially, given you have a quarterback and a team you have there and a structure you have there, to go somewhere else where he's probably getting 2 years, maybe even 3 year chance on a crap team like the Jaguars or the Lions, and then he loses a job and his rep is tarnished based on that one spot. If indeed we believe that Andy Reid is on his final years, based on his health issues, based on other stuff outside of football, I think Eric Bienemy is likely going to be the guy to take over for Andy Reid once Andy Reid decides to retire. That's why I think it's going to be played out. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying that is the case. But he's not getting interviews probably because he does not want to interview. Because, believe me, if Eric Bienemy put his name out there, you know damn well, especially given who he is coaching and the profile of that team, he's going to get look-sees from people, from the teams. I don't think he's getting interviews because of the fact that he has not put his name out there, because he is, in my opinion, happy where he's at now. And I'm speculating here that he will be the guy in line to replace Andy Reid when Andy Reid decides to retire, which I believe is closer than people give credit for. So, okay, let's change up here a little bit and go into some basketball talk real quick. Anthony Davis, the Lakers, is expected to return tonight. The Lakers were 7-10 without Davis. The Lakers have been struggling. They were struggling with him, to be honest with you. I still think, despite how bad this year's been for the Lakers, and they're still mediocre. I think right now they're the 8th seed in the West, which means they're a play-in team. But I do think they are still a team you have to fear, because if they decide to figure it out, and they do figure it out with AD and LeBron and Russell Westbrook and Frank Vogel as head coach, and he gets things in order, you still have to consider that triumphant, dangerous, if they figure it out. Now, they may not figure it out. So far, they haven't figured it out, and we're now just slightly midway through the year. But I think if you are an NBA fan, if you are the Suns or the Warriors and teams on top, you should probably still keep an eye on the Lakers, because there's still enough time between now and April to make a run, to get into the top 4 or 5 in the West, which is it's going to take it, because right now it's the Western Conference is wide open. It's the Suns and the Warriors and the Grizzlies, top 3. Utah's has gotten banged up recently. They missed Rudy Gobert. They've lost a couple games here, So there's a lot of space still for teams to take over here. Denver is still figuring things out. I mean, they're supposed to get Jamal Murray back soon. But there's still room for the Lakers to make a run here to... They're not going to catch Golden State and Phoenix, but there's time for them to to make a run to get out of that play-in spot. And I don't care who you are. If they figure things out by April, and of course, this is the big if. If Anthony Davis is healthy alongside LeBron and Russell Westbrook, you don't want to play him in the playoffs. I'm just saying, you don't want to play him. Doesn't mean you're going to win a championship, but they are going to be the hardest out for a team ranked low as they are, or will be at that point. So that will be interesting to see what happens to AD if he comes back, he stays healthy. I got into a conversation with somebody on Twitter a couple days ago. Lakers played the Heat on Sunday. Heat won that game. And then one of my followers put up a tweet with a picture of LeBron James in a Miami Heat uniform. One of the new South Beach uniforms, the new ones. And he put the caption, LeBron, ... please. Basically, it's the only way for him to come back to Miami. So I retweeted him and said, and quote tweeted him and said, why? And it's not to say that LeBron is not great. If you had told me 4 years, even 4 years ago, we can get LeBron James back to Miami, here in Miami. And you guys know I'm a Heat fan, so obviously that's me. I would have said, hell yeah. I'll take two years with LeBron. But LeBron at 37, and it's actually less about the age, because he's still great. He's still having a fantastic year. If the Lakers were actually winning games, he actually would be in the MVP discussion. But there's so much now that comes with having LeBron James. It was worth it 10 years ago, 12 years ago when they had the big three. Because LeBron was young. LeBron was still figuring things out. Yes, he had the entourage and all that, and all the things that came with that, the egos, all that. But it was worth it because LeBron, he was young at the time. So there was still a ceiling. The ceiling's been reached with LeBron. He won't be better than he ever was at his peak. He's still really great, but he'll never be better than he is now. Okay? And then you have to add the baggage to come with that. Okay? And another thing, too, also, you get LeBron James here. Who are you actually trading out for that? Someone said that, would you trade Bam Adebayo for LeBron? I go, no, because there's a reason why. And it's stupid, because Bam would be one of the reasons LeBron comes to Miami. So why would you want to take on an asset that's actually attractive for LeBron to want to come to Miami in the first place to get him? It makes no sense at all. Bam would be a reason LeBron would want to come here in the first place, hypothetically speaking, of course. So it was a silly argument. You know, if you get LeBron on a relatively cheap deal or a cheaper, give draft picks and maybe a couple pieces here while you keep your core together, I will sign up for that, of course. Provided LeBron is easy-ish to work with. I'm not saying LeBron's hard to work with, but the passive-aggressive thing is a problem. And LeBron obviously likes to do things his way. Part of the reason Miami and LeBron didn't go beyond 4 years is because LeBron want to do things a certain way, and the Heat brass were not willing to change. Now, the Cavs are willing to change. The Lakers are willing to change. The Heat and Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra were not willing to change. So, it is what it is. I wouldn't take him now, honestly, to where it will gut my roster. Now, if he couple pieces here and draft pick for another year or 2 year run for a title, go right ahead. But I'm not gutting my roster and my core just to get LeBron James at this point now. Not at 37 years old. At 32, I'll do it for it, definitely. Today, there's more talks. Second day in a row, the Major League Baseball and the Players Association are going to be meeting today. So far, zero progress on that front, on the lockout. And the report came out today also that the owners are willing to miss games at this point now. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe it's all bravado. Maybe it's just bum and chest here. Who knows? I still think we'll get baseball. We might miss some spring training games, but I think we'll get baseball still by April. I'm optimistic. Now, see me in 2 weeks and see if that's still the case. What else here? Some wrestling talk here. The WWE apparently is pushing for Ronda Rousey to return to Rumble. There was a report also I saw on social media yesterday too that WWE and Vince were actually pushing for Ronda Rousey to be a part of WrestleMania in April. Won't surprise me if Rousey shows up next few months. She's had a kid. I don't know what shape she's in, obviously, and from my vantage point, and you guys know my story with wrestling. I came back watching after 17 years in 2019. Now, Rousey's last match was that same year. I started watching in June of 2019. She stopped at WrestleMania 35 in April of 2019. So I didn't get to experience the 1 year Rousey in WWE. A lot of people I talk to, people on my co-hosts on Take the Wrestling podcast, Mike and Joe, they all think that she was not that great. A lot of people I talk to also have the same opinion. But she's still a name, and she'll garner interest. Would it surprise me that she does come back? No, not at all. Do I want to come back? I don't mind it. She's a name. Who cares? So, last thing before you go. Last thing on the docket here. Hashtag free Mustafa Ali. Last week, Mustafa Ali, of course, asked for his release from the WWE. A few days later, the WWE rejected his request. Now, that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen still, because I remember when Andrade last year had asked for his release from the E, and they said no at first, and then a few weeks later he got it granted. He has been misused. There's a lot to criticize. There's a lot to criticize the WWE for, creatively, not creatively. Sometimes people go overboard with it. But in the case of Mustafa Ali, and use to all the wrestling podcasters out there, they'll all tell you he has been misused. This is a talented guy, great in the ring for starters, great in-ring talent, but also great on the stick as well too. And I think actually that if first off the retribution angle they did last year, I thought could have worked. And the fact that I had him as the leader was a great idea. And unfortunately, it didn't work because they could put the kibosh on the whole angle. And he's been kind of milling around for the last year or so. He asked for a leave recently, too, because he's had another kid. Him and his wife had a kid. And then that's now extended to a few months now. The guy is way too talented to not be used on the roster. And if you're not going to use him, and I think the probably reason why they probably rejected his request because they know how talented he is, and they know he goes to say AEW, he'll get some run. I know a lot of people have opinions about whether he worked at AEW. I think because of the fact that he has creative ideas that Vince unfortunately didn't want to sign off on. Because the thing we hear about Mustafa Ali is that he's a very creative person. I think Tony Khan would embrace. I know a lot of people, podcasters and wrestling journalists that they think that AEW is a bad fit, but I think AEW will give him the space to do the things he wants to do, creatively speaking. And that's all you need is space. And we know how Vince is. Vince is very by the book, and he's very it's his way to highway. And I get it, it's his company. You have to agree or disagree, whatever. But it's just one of those things where you hate seeing great talent wasted, and not because of something bad, not because of drugs, or because it's not even being used or harnessed correctly. You see that with Ali, of course, in WWE, and a couple of the guys. Aleister Black, prior to leaving WWE and now going to AEW. Not being used correctly or harnessed correctly, and it's a shame. It's a shame because this is great talent, and it's not to say like someone like Ali who's great in the ring but not great on the stick. He's great on both. He's great on the stick and in the ring. So it makes no sense for me why Vince is, find him something to do. I just don't get it. Find him something to do. So, I hope it gets released. And if he doesn't, please use him, and give him some room to work his magic. So anyway, I think that's enough for me. That's about 35 minutes of podcasting time. I appreciate you guys listening to this podcast. Again, on Twitter at each7, join me. Discuss, talk, interact. We talk wrestling, we talk sports, we talk politics, we talk anywhere you want. And of course, Earnestly Podcast Network. Of course, all podcast platforms. Like I said, everything's down on one feed. We're having a good time doing that. Lots of pods coming this week, so look out watch the feed. We have this show coming up now. We're going to have Football's Awesome dropping in a couple hours, and In the Paint later on, and then all that. So look out for that. We'll probably do one of these probably later in a week. Talk to you guys later. God bless you guys, and stay up, and see ya.